Well, good morning. Appreciate all of you being here. Thank you so much for coming in early to spend a little time with us here. We're going to talk about the Child of God Rescue. It is quite a little project that I've become involved in now for a little over 10 years. I don't know if there's a way to turn this down, but I have a feeling this might be just blowing these people out. Does this seem loud to you? Seems a little loud from talking. I'm trying to not talk too loud, and I have a pretty loud voice. Mom always said, "Be quiet. You talk too loud." Use your inside voice. I said, I don't have one. I just have this one. It just booms out. How am I doing? Seems like it might be a little off the charts here on the volume, gentlemen. Let's see. Yeah, it's probably right in this area here. No, I see arrows, but I'm not sure anything indicates volume, to be honest. Okay, I'll just keep talking. And is it all right? How about now? How's the volume? Is it not so bad? Sure it's okay? I don't want to blow anybody out. Okay. All right, so welcome to Child of God Rescue. I want to tell you a little bit about this project that started 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I got an email from someone in Africa, which is a 99.999% of the time a fraud. You get an email from Africa and they tell you they want your help, they need something, or they've got something for you. It is 99.999% of the time a fraud. And the people in Africa will tell you this too. The honest people in Africa will tell you this. But as it happened for me, I took that email and I did a lot of due diligence about it. I spent a year emailing and making phone calls and checking with third party to verify whether or not this was true, because the email itself was different and it sounded relatively sincere. And all it was asking was, can you come and help our two churches? Because these two churches had been in contact with a COG that existed a while back. I don't know if it still does. It doesn't matter. But it was a COG, and they were in a place, but there's a lot of tribal conflict in Kenya. There are 42 tribes in Kenya, by the way. And tribes don't get along. You talk about America being a racist country. Well, whether that be true or not, there's tribalism in Africa, let me tell you. Serious tribalism. And they don't treat each other well all the time. And so there was a little bit of a conflict about that, and some people from one tribe were sort of not doing well with another tribe, so they split off from that, and we had two congregations that were meeting basically under two different trees. A little group. They said, we're very young in the faith. Would you come and help? So that's why I did all this due diligence. Like I said, a full year, a little more than a year. Writing emails, calling, talking, asking them many, many, many questions. Ended up going there to verify, because that, in the end, was the last thing I could do. In order to verify that these people were genuine Christians, I needed to go there. So we prayed about it, my wife and I talked about it. I ended up going. And when I got there, lo and behold, not only were there churches there, which, by the way, turned out to be my brothers and sisters in the faith, but there were orphans. Now, I wasn't thinking of orphans at all. Wasn't thinking of orphans, didn't intend to go get involved with orphans, had no desire to go help orphans, which is foolish of me and poor of me, because what does God's word tell us? Pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless and the orphans in their afflictions and keep oneself unspotted from the world, right? Well, I knew this scripture, believe me. I knew this scripture. I don't know why I hadn't thought of it. And worst of all, as I have said, many of you have heard me say this before, but some of you haven't, worst of all, I'm a fatherless child. You would think it would have occurred to me to help fatherless and orphan children. But a little slow on the uptake. Okay, I wasn't the sharpest knife in the drawer. We do what we can do. So God had to help me by bringing me to Africa and putting me in front of orphan children. And finally, okay, I get it, Father. I need to be involved in helping orphans and fatherless kids. And that's pretty much how the Child of God rescue started, because of something that God put me through to help me see I need to get involved with orphans and fatherless children. And that is part of the original Christian faith. Christianity is not easy, as we talked about yesterday, but it is also something that has more than one kind of level to it, brothers and sisters. Preaching the gospel, let's not minimize that preaching the gospel is important. It's vital. Preaching the gospel is really important. But it is not the only part. We don't just preach the gospel by telling the world what the good news is. We also preach the gospel by reaching into lives like the fatherless children and changing them and helping them. And that's what Child of God Rescue is. So we began to work with orphan children, fatherless children at that time. And for me, I needed to be absolutely certain that this was in no way a fraud. So what I did, the first time I went to Kenya, was we had 27 orphans at that time. They were being cared for by brethren in the church. There was no orphanage at all. And they were in villages all over the western part of Kenya. Okay? If you look at Kenya is an East African country. It borders the Indian Ocean. And the far west part of Africa borders, the far west part of Kenya borders Lake Victoria, which is at the south end of the Nile. Okay? So the far west part of that is the rural area, and that's where our orphanage is. So I walked about 50 to 60 miles to all kinds of villages in the hills and backcountry of this area of western Kenya in order to go to every single house and look and see that they were actually taking care of these orphans, to validate that it was true. Because I was not going to do anything for God that I didn't know was absolutely true. And so I did literally everything that I could physically do to validate that these are real orphans that were being taken care of by people, and I did it personally. And I lost about 20 pounds. It's a great weight loss program too, by the way. Up and down these hills. I'm telling you, these people can walk up some mountains. And so anyway, that's what I did to start off, and we've been blessed, and we've stayed with it despite challenges and hardships. In 2010, we actually had someone come in who was extraordinarily wealthy, just a fabulously wealthy couple. And for no reason that I can think of, I did nothing. These people found us and said, "Hey, do you take care of orphans in Africa?" "Yes, we do." "Well, would you like us to build an orphanage?" "Well, yeah, that'd be great." So, brothers and sisters, I had nothing to do with this. This is no master plan. This is one of God's little kids that he's ushering around going, "Hey, do you understand now? Good. Now come over here. Okay, watch yourself, watch yourself." And that's what's happening. But through that blessing, we were able to build an orphanage and eventually a school to help orphans. Now, we built our school for orphans and fatherless children. And when it started, there were like 27 kids in it. Now there are 239. The only children that attend Wisdom Academy, that's the name of our school, are our orphans and destitute children, children who could not otherwise pay for school. Now, I've had people, some of you don't know this, and some of you do. Greg knows this because he's like me. He grew up somewhat like me. And that is, I've had people say that, well, it doesn't matter whether, the fatherless, you don't have to have a school just for fatherless kids. It's all the same. It is not the same. If you think going to school is the same for every child, whether they're fatherless or not, you are telling me you're not a fatherless kid and you haven't talked to one. because I was one. And if you've been there, you know it's different. And if you haven't, you might not know. But it does make a difference to have a school just for kids who are having a really tough time in this world. It makes a difference. And our school, Wisdom Academy, is that school for these kids in this little part, this one little part of Africa. Now, again, this is not because of me or some master plan, but I am so grateful and happy to tell you that Wisdom Academy is a primary school from pre-K through 8th grade. It works inside a district according to every single rule of the Kenyan Ministry of Education. They make the curriculum. We do not teach anything different. It just so happens that the Kenyan Ministry of Education requires, it's not an option, you must teach the Christian Bible. So since we have to, we go ahead and do that. And happily, this school, with nothing but orphans and destitute children in it, is ranked. Now, in Kenya, this is not an advertisement. It's not just like somebody hyping it. In Kenya, they test the students. They do national tests. They send it to every school across the nation. They rank the schools by that test. If you test high, you're up in the school district. You rank. Our school, Wisdom Academy, is the #1 school in the Gucha School District, and there are about 100 primary schools. We are the #1 school. So that is all because of the grace of God. Again, that's not because of some master plan on my part. It's not because Richard Mogindi was some kind of superlative PhD in education. It's because of the grace of God opening doors and helping us to help fatherless children. But they not only get to go to school, brothers and sisters, they go to the best school in the district. And they're the most helpless of children in that area. So I'm very grateful for all of that. We got a chance this year to do something we've never done before. We took what could be called a mission trip or a group. For 10 years, the last 5 times that anyone went to Africa, it was basically me by myself. One time I took my son with me, but other than that, it was pretty much me by myself going to Kenya to do this. But this last time, this is my 6th trip this year, we took a little group. And we hope in the next 2 years, I go about every 2 years to take another group. So we appreciate, the chance to do that and to open it up for some other people. But that's what we did this year, and this is kind of our trip. So we took a total of 7 people from the United States. The Hines family is to the left here. That's Hannah to the far left, Eli. The father is Patrick Hines. Some of you know him. And the other daughter's name is Abigail. That's a strange white man in the middle. I don't know who he is. But this guy holding the bottle is Nicodemus Oroko. He's an elder in our church, and he was one of the ones who came out to greet us. That's my wife to Nicodemus's left, and to the far right is Matthew Ball, who also came with us, was in our party for the trip. So we flew into Nairobi, and then we took transportation from Nairobi and drove out to Ogimbo. This is about a 5-6 hour trip now. The roads are pretty good, which is great, by the way, because when I first came, those roads were a trip by themselves. It was the worst roads I'd ever traveled, but these roads are actually pretty comfortable. So we traveled for about 6 hours, and we arrived in the evening. When we arrived, the orphans were very excited to see us, and they had flowers for the women, and they were all gathered around, and we took this little shot. They sang songs for us. They were just super happy to meet us and greet us. And so we now have 39 orphans that are in primary school that stay at the orphanage all the time. We have another 16 that are in high school. So we have a total right now of 55 orphans that are under our care in one way or the other. This is a shot of our orphans, of all the orphans that are attending primary school. Some of our orphans are too young to attend primary school. We do have little bitty ones. Not quite babies, but barely walking, that are not ready for school. School in Kenya is supposed to start when you're 3 years old. There are 3 grades before first grade. It's unlike America in that regard. But these are all the students that were at Wisdom Academy that day that are our orphans, and so we lined up all our orphans and took a little shot in one of the areas of the school. This is our school having an assembly, and we're getting a shot from the second level. The second level of this building, and you'll probably see it in another shot in our school, it's a 2-story building, is the assembly hall for the school. This is the assembly hall for the school. The church also uses it for church meetings. But this is someone up at the top taking a picture down at the assembly of the students. They put on a little assembly and did a show for us. It was just absolutely charming. I wish I had a wonderful film of it. I could show you highlights of it now, but I'm not technologically savvy enough to put all that together for you. So you're just going to have to bear with me on it. But we have 239 students here that came together on the assembly and gave us all kinds of wonderful things. One of the things they did was they brought a group out and they recited memory verses. Our children memorize biblical verses, and they're very excited to be able to repeat those. That means a lot to them. Religion in Kenya is important still. It's not like it is in America right now. It actually matters to all the people and consequently to the kids. And so as a result, the ability to quote a verse from the Bible is actually an achievement that's recognized. It's important. And these children come up and they quote scriptures, and they take, somewhat pride and accomplishment in doing that, and we encourage that because we want them obviously to know the Christian Bible. So that was what they did here, and that was impressive and important. We visited all the classes. You can see Abigail Hines is here in the middle. In the back, speaking to other students, is Eli Hines. My wife is a teacher of 30 plus years. She is quite an impressive and accomplished teacher. I go places and I say, my wife is a better teacher than me, guys. And they say, yes, we know. Yeah. We're pretty clear on that, Mardy. So she's quite a teacher, and she came and spoke to the teachers and gave them some teaching aids and made a presentation to all the teaching staff there at the school, which was, I think, very helpful and impactful. And we tried to inspire those teachers and tell them and encourage them for the important job they're doing. They are underpaid compared to other teachers. Other teachers are paid much more. Public school teachers in Kenya are getting raises right now that are very significant, and private schools are tending to trend up their salaries for those people. When I started 10 years ago with this, I did research for what it takes to pay a teacher, because I knew we wanted to teach the kids. We don't just want to feed the kids. We want to teach these children. We want to give them a real chance. So I interviewed a teacher, and he said the standard public school teacher salary is $100 a month. That was really good pay, $100 a month, by the way. They don't need as much as we need in terms of money to live, okay? It's a lower standard. The GDP in Kenya at that time was $800 a year. The GDP now, I think, is about $1,200 a year in Kenya. But public school teachers now, their salaries were at $200 last year, $200 a month, which is it's doubling the salary. It's nothing compared to America, but it's something compared to our little budget, to double the salaries of the teachers. And then it's gone up to $300. So they negotiated a deal with the government to raise public school teacher salaries that is a graduated thing to try to get them up to a better standard of living. Nonetheless, we visited the classrooms, and our children, our young people got to visit. My wife and I, we visited the classes. Elaine taught a couple of different classes while she was there. So it was very interesting, very informative. We also did a help project. We painted a couple of different buildings there. This is the lunch hall, if you will. I don't know what to call it. You don't go inside it. This is where they cook the lunch and they distribute it out of the window. We have a building for that. It needed to be painted, so we were painting it and some other buildings. And this is pretty much everybody but Matt. I think Matt Ball is taking the picture, and everyone else is somewhere in this picture. My leg is down there at the bottom. I'm underneath the table, which is a good look for me, actually. So, and the children were fascinated to see Omasongo's painting, because that's, by the way, what they call white people is Omasongos. So it's always good to see an Omasongo out there painting, you know what I mean? Another thing that was really important that we had plenty of time to do, and the people on the trip had plenty of time to do, was really interact and play with and talk to the kids. And so they got to do that. This is the Hines young man named Eli, and I think he's holding a little boy named David, if I'm not mistaken. That's one of our new additions. David, I want to say he's maybe 2 years old, and he's holding him. This is Matt Ball over here. And he is with, come on, Marty, you know this guy's name. Wow, I can't, I'm blanking on this young man's name. He is so cool. Anyway, everybody loves, Shem is his name. His name is Shem. Shem is cool, and he's with Matt Ball, who he just loves Matt, fell in love with Matt, wanted to go home with him. Matt wanted to take him home, but anyway, Shem was a great kid, and Matt spent time with all the kids, and he's so good with kids. Matt is awesome with kids. So we spent a lot of time with the children, and we got to interact with them, give them our love, encouragement, and that was a powerful piece of what we did. We also went out to the churches. The little church, our little church in America has maybe 10 people in it. Okay, scattered across America. In Kenya, we have 5 congregations, and we have maybe 600 people that attend. So we went to some of our congregations in Kenya, and part of what we did was we showed the group, I showed the group, this is how people go to church every day. So in our 5 local congregations throughout the area, everyone walks. And some of the people, just to get to the local congregation, will walk for an hour or more through all kinds of terrain, up and down mountains. Am I blocking you? Okay, sorry. This is a bridge. I don't know if you can see this, but this is probably not going to stand up to the Department of Transportation's inspection. But this is a bridge across a river that our brethren go to every time they come to Sabbath services. For the Ritongo congregation. We have 5 different congregations. But I wanted the people in the group to get to see, hey, this is what it takes to go to church in Kenya. Okay? Walk for a while, cross a few bridges, and a little bit different than America. We also went and visited the brethren's homes. I've obviously done this a lot, because this is my 6th time. But it's fascinating to visit the brethren's home. I wish I could take all of you right now magically and have us right outside one of the brethren's home. By the way, they would be delighted to see you. They would love that you were there. Because in Kenya, if you visit someone's home, it's an honor. And if you will come in and say a prayer in that home, that's like bringing them a gift. That's what they consider it. So they invite you into their homes. Their homes are all our brethren live in homes like this. This is a better roof in some ways. The aluminum roof you see on the left. Some of our houses are like the thatch roof over here. They are dirt floors. Many of the aluminum roofs have lots of holes in them too. They sleep. In this particular, I want to say this person is the one we visited where they had a room with, it was one big room, there was a bed in there, their children, it was the children's room. 6 children slept in the bed. One bed, about the size of one of these tables. 6 children. And there were holes throughout the roof. This is my wife in the front there, that's Patrick Hines. This is another one of our elders, his name is Elijah. In the back there in the blue shirt you can see Richard. And just to his right, the guy in the cowboy hat is Matt. So this is us visiting one of the brethren's home. We also spent some time playing with the children. Patrick Hines is a big Frisbee fan, so he taught them how to throw the Frisbee. They were very excited about throwing the Frisbee, so they had a lot of Frisbee throwing instruction and opportunities there. And of course, the Hines kids were out there playing with them too. That was all wonderful and good. You know, it's very important not just to teach children, but to play with them. Oops, I went back one. Need to go see if I can go back one. Does this go back? Should go back. No. Let's see if I can get there. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this river. We went down to visit this river. It's about 2 miles, mile and a half from the orphanage. It's all downhill. A couple different stories about this river that the guys are standing by. This is one of the places you can get water. The water's completely free. Okay, they have a totally functional water system. It's called a river. You walk down there, you fill up the water you need, and you just bring it right back to your house. It's no problem at all. That's the water system in Kenya. Well, this is sort of a downhill water system. You have to walk downhill to get it, and then you fill it up, and then you walk back uphill. So if you're over 12, you carry a 5-gallon bucket on your head. If you're under 12, we start you out at 3. If you're under 6, we don't let you carry the water. But we get you into a gallon system. It's a graduated system to train you how to take care of the water system. And that is what our children do to get water to the orphanage. That's one of the reasons that among the things we do for our orphans and that we're trying to do, besides sustaining, we make a contribution each month to sustain feeding the children and educating them. But beyond that, we have sustainability projects, long-term projects like digging a well. If we could dig a well, then the children wouldn't have to run the water system. And that's one of our goals, is we're fundraising now as one of our major projects to dig a well. We have other projects like that for long-term sustainability, so they'll be self-sustaining in the country. But one of them is the well. Another story about this river. This is the very river that Richard Mogende went down in another part. He went down the river to cut some grass for our cows. We have, I want to say, 4 cows at our orphanage. Because we feed our children, and in Kenya you don't go to the supermarket down the dairy aisle. The dairy aisle is right up there where the cows are. And the milk is fresh. And so we have cows, and we have goats, and we have chickens. We have livestock there that that help feed the orphanage. But anyway, he was going to get some cut grass to feed the cattle, because you have to feed the cattle, obviously. And so you look for places where the grass needs to be mowed. You go out to someone who owns the land and say, if I cut this grass, how much do I have to pay you? You buy their grass to go feed your cattle. So Richard was negotiating one of those transactions, and they heard a child scream, a little baby scream. And they looked, and there was about a 1 or 2 year old across the river. The river was running swiftly. It was high, and she was holding on to a branch. Okay? So Richard and the farmer went and grabbed the baby and brought it back and tried to find the mother, thinking, someone had a terrible accident. Maybe the mother fell in, who knows. Come to find out, there was a 14-year-old girl who decided she didn't want her baby anymore, and she threw it in the river. Okay? So Richard took the baby to the Children's Services Ministry, took it to the government, because everything we do is legal. This is not a pretend orphanage. This is a completely registered orphanage, and everything we do is legal and registered, right? So he took the child to the Child Services and said, here's what happened to the baby. And he said, can we take it? They said, yes, please take it. So they went. We now have that little girl. She's about 5 or 6 years old. Her name is Angel. We named her Angel because when she was holding onto that branch, Richard's assumption was no 1 or 2-year-old could hold onto that branch, so there must have been an angel underneath lifting her up. So that's the story of Angel. It's an illustration of how many of our orphans come to us. All kinds of different stories. We've had orphans that were about to be burned to death that we've rescued and brought into the orphanage. We have an orphan in our orphanage that was literally found naked by the side of the road and abandoned. That sounds like that's maybe a fictional film. It's not in Kenya. People abandon children all the time. It's a sad, tragic truth. There are over 1 million, I believe the stats now are, there are over 1 million orphans in Kenya. People throw children away. We could not take care of all the orphans that need to be taken care of. If our orphanage were to say, okay, if you have an orphan, please bring it, we would have over 1,000 orphans in a week. Just like that. The need is profound, overwhelming. But that's the river there, and of course that's part of our group, and that's Richard with Patrick, Matt, and Eli down by the river. This is a film that I can't play for you, again, because I'm technologically challenged. But these are high school orphans who are singing Blessed Assurance, that old gospel hymn you guys know, Blessed Assurance. Yeah. So they all sing that, and this particular high school orphan steps up and basically expresses to the donors, we appreciate so much what you're doing. Thank you very much for giving to us, and thank you so much for all the gifts that you make possible for us so we can have a chance in life. And that's what this young man is saying, and I can't play that for you. But that's where we are with the orphans. And it was a very successful trip. I'm very grateful that we were blessed. I think there were a lot of adventures. If I had all the people here with you, they'd be telling you of the adventures they had and the fun and the excitement and the things they learned. It is a transformative trip. Dealing with orphans is part of the original faith. Helping them is part of the original faith. If you're not helping orphans somewhere in your life, I encourage you to read James 1 again and consider finding a place you can make an impact to help orphans, fatherless kids, because it's part of our faith. And not because of me, not because of these orphans, but because it's part of your faith. It's part of the original faith, brothers and sisters. I appreciate so much you being here, and I'm opening it up for any questions you guys have. Rachel. Yes, thank you for asking that. All our orphans go to our churches, our 5 congregations, and they can go to any one of those 5 congregations they want, because we have people who would look after our children at each one of those 5 congregations. So they can go to any of those churches. What happened for us, interestingly, of the 239 children that go to Wisdom Academy, only 39 are our orphans. The other, unless the high school there, so there's 200 kids there that are not associated with our orphanage, and we do not try to compel anyone to come to our church. That's not what we do. We have church services on the Sabbath. We keep the feast, but we don't require that they come. So some of the children were coming to the feast and coming to Sabbath services, and we were, out of an abundance of caution, telling the children, you can't just come to you need to go ask your parents. This is not school. This is Sabbath service. This is the Feast of Tabernacles. You're not required to be here. It's not part of school. So we would send them back home. The parents came and said, why can't our children come to your Feast of Tabernacles? We said they can. All the children in Wisdom Academy attend Sabbath services and attend the Feast of Tabernacles. So in reality, in this case, these children are not just orphans. The truth is that these children are your younger brothers and sisters in the faith. That is who you're helping. And I can't thank you enough for doing it, because we need our young people to understand and to be deeply ingrained and taught and reared up in the original faith. There's precious few of us. So, Willie? A well is expensive. When we first looked at a well, we asked about digging a well 8 years ago, and we were told it was $60,000 to drill a well in Kenya. So recently we have revisited this. We did a fundraiser, and we paid for a geological survey, and we had that done. That report came in, and then we got a bid on it. It looks like it's going to be somewhere about $25,000 to drill a well for our orphanage right now. So we are launching that fundraiser, and we've been working on that. Patrick Hines, who you saw a picture of before, he volunteered to be the spearhead of that particular fundraiser of sustainability, long-term sustainability. We have some other long-term projects we'd like to buy and build a farm, so a farm can raise the food to feed our kids. So we'd like to do that too. We have some other ones, but this well is at the top of our list, and the cost we're thinking right now is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about $25,000. There's going to be the cost for the drill itself, and there's going to be a few extra expenses to make sure. Everything we do in the Child of God Rescue, brothers and sisters, is transparent and accountable. What I'm telling you, I don't think is the truth. I know it's the truth. I have been there. This is a real orphanage. This is a real school. I have seen the teachers teach. I have seen the kids. I have been going back there for 10 years. I don't think these kids are pretend. I know they're real. I know they are. I've seen the kids be raised. I can name them for you. We have 5 orphans that started out with us back in 2008. I know every one of them. I can name them. So I'm telling you, this is the real deal. And we make sure that everything you do with us is absolutely transparent, absolutely accounted for. Yes, ma'am. They do. The 2 national languages, they have 2 national languages. I have no idea why. But they have 2 national languages. One is English and one is Swahili. And they speak both. However, they speak Swahili much better than they speak English. Few of them speak English very well, but they do speak it. And the children will speak English to you.
Bibles in Swahili and English then?
Primarily, we brought them Bibles. We brought Bibles for every single orphan. All of them. We brought enough Bibles for our high school orphans and all the little orphans, all the younger ones. So we brought English Bibles for every one of them. So yes, they all have an English Bible, but they also have Bibles in Swahili. And in our services, it's not infrequent. It's a pretty big challenge, just to let you know. As I said, there's 42 tribes. The majority of the tribal people in our congregations, their tribe is actually Kisi, which means they speak the tribal language of Ekaguse. The older people in the congregation, many of them only speak the tribal language, which they call the mother tongue. They do not speak Swahili, and they do not speak English. None of it. So if you want to speak to all the people, the easiest tongue or language to use is Ekaguse, because it's the mother tongue of the mothers, the fathers, the grandmothers, and the grandfathers, and the children pretty much know it. But the younger generation is transforming. It's becoming Swahili speakers primarily. They're losing the mother tongue in the younger generations. And Swahili is more often spoken by the young people. So Richard, at times, I have seen him deliver a sermon in 3 languages: Ekaguse, Swahili, and English, which is cumbersome and a lot of effort to preach the gospel in 3 languages. Just to have it done in 2 is tough, because you have to wade through someone saying it, then someone saying it again in another language. It's pretty tough. Anyway, does that answer your question? Yes, ma'am.
Speak a little bit about politics in Kenya, the political situation, because I'm more encouraged about Kenya than I am about. I'm more encouraged about supporting more in Kenya, rather than other countries in Africa that are dominated by Muslims, and there's a lot of anarchy and violence. So I hope it's still pretty positive there.
Yes, it is. They had an election where there was a pretty contentious political battle, but fortunately there was no outbreak of serious violence in Kenya. And they've reelected the president that they used to have, and I forget his name right now, but he became reelected, and he's very pro-Christian, very he's more conservative, and he wants the nation to continue on and build infrastructure and be in a good spot. He's a pretty honest politician as far as politicians go. And I'm pretty certain that, if I remember right, this is the president of Kenya who told President Obama, when President Obama spoke to him and said, you need to make same-sex marriage okay in Kenya, he said, no, we don't believe in same-sex marriage and homosexuality. We're Christian here. So, Kenya is a dominantly Christian nation. And when the few times, thank God it has been few, that Muslims have come down from Sudan and slaughtered some Christians, the Kenyan government has responded quickly and decisively. They haven't tried to negotiate. They've gone in, they have killed the terrorists, and they have freed the hostages, and they have dealt with it in that manner. They don't pussyfoot around with things. They deal with it very directly. So it is, I'm not going to kid you, it's an African nation, so there are places where there are things that are not as safe as they would be in America, but comparatively, it's a pretty stable nation. It's a very Christian nation, and as far as doing the gospel work, now we're talking about something a little different, but as far as the gospel work, there's an enormous opportunity to do the gospel work and to help brethren in Kenya. And there's a lot of interest in it. There's also a lot of fraud in Kenya, so you have to be careful who you deal with. It's really important to know who you're dealing with and that you are on the ground and close to it. It's why I went there. So I'm not about to do something that's fraudulent. That's a no-go. You can't work for Jesus Christ. You can't work for the cause of the kingdom and be involved in that kind of stuff. Does that help? Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
For mothers who throw their children in the lake, would that be considered murder for them? Do they try to find them?
Is there any legal what?
Consequences.
To none that I know of. This 14-year-old child, nothing happened to her. The courts and the judicial punishment, and they're dealing with crime and tragedy and all that, are pretty much overwhelmed with dealing with basic things like trying to keep people from killing one another, stealing from one another. Someone throwing away a baby is not immediately causing any danger to the greater society. It's devastating to the child, and I don't mean to make this small. It is a heartbreak to think that you could be walking by the road, as Richard has been, and hear something crying, look over and see a naked child literally laying in the gutter, and people walking past it. See, that doesn't happen in America. In America, if someone walks past a trash can and they think they hear a baby crying in it, they stop and they get it. And even if they don't do anything with it, the child services are out there and they do. The child is picked up. That's not it in Kenya. Children die in Kenya with regularity because people are unable to care for them, and they are doing and acting in ways that are not responsible toward children, obviously. When you have 14-year-olds having children, there's always the possibility that 14-year-old might not have been fully prepared to take on the aspect of being a parent full-time. So that's problematic. Yes?
Since you get the water from the river, that you have some kind of filtering system.
Yeah, that would be the water for cleaning and things like that we do and we need all the time. But we also buy water. And we have big tanks. I have lots and lots of pictures, but I didn't show you all the pictures that I could. We couldn't be here long enough for me to show you all the pictures I have, but we have big tanks that we have water delivered to, but that costs money. They bring a big water truck by and they pump water into these big black tanks for which we use for drinking and other things. But yes, we do have other water sources we have to pay for, and we pay a fair amount of money every year for it, especially in a drought. Lunches are, I'll get you next. Lunches are ugali, cornmeal turned hot cornmeal. I don't know if you've ever had hot cornmeal, but and sometimes vegetables. A big meal in Kenya for the kids, a really special meal, is rice and beans. They might, if they're lucky, eat meat once a year. It's rice and ugali and vegetables and beans. That's what our children dine on, period. So, yes, sir.
Are most of the orphanages have their children from 14-year-old, 13-year-old, and very young brothers?
No, I think they come from also parents that die. There's quite a bit of disease, and so parents pass away and leave their children abandoned because the mother and father have died. Or the mother died and the father left, just walked away. So there's no one there. And literally, we have seen, here's a story. My son is with me. He's in college. We're walking the first time he's been there. We go to visit the Rotongo church, actually. We're outside the church, and there's a little kid walking past. He's barefoot. He has shorts on, a T-shirt with 2 big ripped holes in it. He's smiling and running up because we are white. White! Can you imagine it? And they've not seen anything like this. This is like a unicorn in Africa, right? So he runs up, and it's like, wow. So he's very excited because this is a white person. And my son looks at him, and Richard talks about him briefly. He says, yeah, this child's parents died about 6 months ago. He has no one. He has AIDS, and the people in this village give him food from time to time, and they'll let him sleep sometimes under something. But yeah, that's him. This is could not have been more than 5 years old. Has no one, and he is on the road. Danny?
What is the situation with land there, like the orphanage? Is that, who owns that land? And the farm that you were talking about, is there plenty of land there, or?
Yeah, we have to do all the legal research about the ownership of the land for the farm before we buy it. And I wouldn't buy the farm until we have all that legal work done. And that's part of the expense of doing it. I won't do it unless we know every bit of it. As far as the orphanage and the school, we did not have the means to do that when we were starting. All that land is owned by Richard Mogende. He literally owns every bit of it. I've spoken to him about it and said, when we get to a place where we can afford the legal means, you need to make this land be the property of a charity and not your own personal property. And he said, I'll do that anytime. We can do it right now. That may not sound like much to any of you, but I know Richard Mogende and I believe him.
Looking at.
That's another piece of the puzzle I need to get advice on. I need a farmer to tell me how much land do we need to feed 40 or 50 kids every day. What do we need for acreage? I need someone to tell me that. I'm not a farmer, so I need that. Any other questions? Okay, sir, Greg.
What's the attitude of children to each other? I grew up, my father left me, my family was my mother got cancer on the ship.
Right.
But, you know, I mean, we had our problems, but at the end, that's what we were.
Right. Our children are much the same. They act like big older brothers and sisters to one another and try to help. Which I'm not trying to say that our orphans are perfect in every way and that they're always, they're little children. They have issues and problems. I'm sure none of you ever had an older brother that picked on you. I'm sure that didn't happen for any of you. But that does happen on occasion, and yes, that happens in our orphanage too. But they do look out for each other. That's a good question. Anything else? All right. God bless you. Thank you so much. I have some kind of pencils with our stuff on it if you want to give that to your young people, and also some sign-up lists if you'd like to get information about Child of God Rescue after this. You're welcome to put down your email, etc., if you'd like to. Don't have to, but that's available.